Law enforcement in America. It's a corporation, much like the NFL, and the talent it attracts, not unlike the NBA. Stick with me and let's break it down using a little common sense. Back in the day, policing wasn't a career people with options gravitated towards. The pay was low, the benefits weren't great, and the job was often thankless. Then came Jordan. Then came Nike. And all of a sudden, the NBA wasn't just a game, it was an empire. More money, better training, elite-level talent. The product improved, and now the NBA is a global phenomenon. What if we did the same thing with law enforcement? What if we actually valued our public servants like we value athletes? But as with everything in America, we'd rather prioritize immediate gratification than long-term improvements. We cut corners, underpay, and then wonder why we have a talent gap in policing. Imagine if the NBA still paid its players minimum wage. Think we'd have LeBron-level talent dominating the league? No. But that's exactly what we do with police officers. And it's not just law enforcement. Look at our presidency. We keep hiring rich old white men, people who are too old, too disconnected, or too comfortable to care about long-term solutions. And what do? They delegate, but not strategically. Instead of precision, they use a sledgehammer approach. Now imagine if we actually took the time to plan, to pay officers well, to recruit the best, to train them properly. The product would improve just like the NBA did. Common sense, right? So what's it going to be, America? Are we going to keep underfunding, undertraining, and then acting surprised at the results? Or are we ready to build a system that actually works? The choice is ours. Gap 3.0's title card appears on a split screen showing both a police academy and a basketball court. Let's delve deeper into the comparison between law enforcement and the NBA. We'll explore the historical context, the evolution of both fields, and the potential future if we apply the same principles of investment and training to law enforcement as we do to professional sports. Gap 2.0's transition to black and white footage of early police forces and early NBA games. First, let's look at the historical context. Policing, much like early professional basketball, started as a job for those with few other options. Pay was minimal and the training was rudimentary. Both fields were functional but far from the well-oiled machines they could be. Gap 2.0's transition to color footage of modern NBA training facilities and high-tech police academies. Now fast forward to today. The NBA has evolved into a multi-billion-dollar industry, driven by investment in talent, state-of-the-art training facilities, and a focus on continuous improvement. Players are not just athletes. They are highly trained professionals with access to the best resources. Gap 2.0's transition to footage of police officers in training juxtaposed with NBA players in practice. Imagine if we applied the same level of investment and training to law enforcement. What if police academies had the same funding and resources as NBA training centers? What if we recruited the best minds and provided them with ongoing education and support? Gap 2.0's transition to a conceptual animation showing a futuristic police academy. The potential future is promising. With proper investment, we could build a law enforcement system that attracts top talent, offers competitive pay, and provides continuous, high-quality training. This would not only improve the effectiveness of our police forces, but also foster a culture of respect and professionalism. Gap 2.0's transition to a montage of positive interactions between police officers and communities. A well-trained, well-compensated police force could transform community relations. Just like the NBA has become a global ambassador for sports, a reformed law enforcement system could become a beacon of justice and equality. Gap 2.0's transition back to the split screen showing the police academy and the basketball court. The evolution of the NBA shows us what is possible when we invest in talent and training. The same principles can apply to law enforcement. It's not just about immediate results. It's about building a sustainable, effective system for the future. Gap 2.0's, transition to a cityscape with a hopeful tone. The choice is ours. Are we ready to invest in the future of law enforcement, just as we have in professional sports? It's a path that requires commitment, but the rewards could be transformative. Let's make it happen. Gap 5.0's, end credits roll over cityscape. Gap 3.0's, title card appears with case studies of reform and growth against a backdrop of a city skyline. In this chapter, we'll examine case studies of successful law enforcement reforms and how they parallel the growth seen in the NBA. We'll also discuss the societal impact of these changes. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of Camden, New Jersey police officers interacting positively with community members. Let's start with Camden, New Jersey. Once plagued by high crime rates and a strained relationship between police and the community, Camden underwent a significant transformation. The city disbanded its police department and rebuilt it with a focus on community policing, increased training, and better resources. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of NBA players engaging in community outreach programs. This approach mirrors how NBA teams invest in community outreach and player development programs. By building trust and fostering relationships, both Camden's police and NBA teams have seen remarkable improvements in their respective fields. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of Richmond, California. Police officers in training and on patrol. Next, we look at Richmond, California. The city implemented a program that focuses on reducing gun violence through community engagement and holistic support for at-risk individuals. This proactive approach has led to a significant drop in crime rates. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of NBA teams using advanced analytics and technology. Similarly, the NBA has embraced advanced analytics and technology to improve player performance and game strategy. Richmond's data-driven approach to policing shows how these same principles can lead to effective and sustainable results in law enforcement. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of positive interactions between police officers and diverse community members. The societal impact of these reforms is profound. Just as the NBA has become a symbol of excellence and unity, reformed police departments like those in Camden and Richmond are becoming beacons of hope and justice in their communities. Gap 2.0's, transition to a montage of police officers and NBA players working together in community events. When we invest in training, resources, and community engagement, we create a positive ripple effect that extends far beyond the immediate outcomes. Both the NBA and reformed police departments show us that with commitment and vision, we can achieve transformative change. Gap 2.0's, transition back to the split screen showing a police academy and a basketball court. The parallels between law enforcement and the NBA are clear. By applying the same principles of investment, training, and community focus, we can build a future where both fields thrive and contribute to a more just and equitable society. Gap 2.0's, transition to a cityscape with a hopeful tone. The choice is ours. Are we ready to invest in the future of law enforcement just as we have in professional sports? It's a path that requires commitment, but the rewards could be transformative. Let's make it happen. Gap 5.0's, end credits rollover cityscape. Gap 3.0's, title card appears with the financial blueprint costs and economic benefits against a backdrop of a financial district skyline. In this chapter, we'll delve into the financial aspects. How much would it cost to implement these changes in law enforcement? What are the potential economic benefits? Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of city council meetings discussing budgets and funding. First, let's consider the initial investment. Implementing comprehensive training programs, upgrading technology, and increasing community outreach efforts requires substantial financial resources. For instance, Camden's police reform cost approximately $68 million over 5 years. This included new training programs, equipment, and community initiatives. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of financial analysts discussing cost-benefit analyses. However, the return on investment can be significant. A safer community can lead to lower crime rates, which in turn reduces the costs associated with crime, such as healthcare, legal proceedings, and incarceration. In Richmond, California, the cost of their community engagement program was offset by a 66% decrease in gun violence, saving the city millions in associated costs. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of thriving local businesses and community events. Beyond direct savings, there are broader economic benefits. Reduced crime rates can lead to increased property values, higher business investments, and a more vibrant local economy. When communities feel safe, they thrive. This is akin to how NBA teams invest in their players and facilities, leading to increased ticket sales, merchandise revenue, and sponsorships. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of police officers and community members working together on initiatives. Moreover, investing in law enforcement reform can create jobs and stimulate local economies. From hiring new officers to developing community programs, these initiatives require a workforce, which can provide employment opportunities and economic growth. Gap 2.0's, transition to a split screen showing financial charts and community events. The parallels between law enforcement investment and the NBA's financial strategies are clear. Both require upfront costs, but offer substantial long-term benefits. By focusing on the bigger picture, we can see that the economic advantages of investing in law enforcement reform are not just theoretical, they are practical and achievable. Gap 2.0's, transition to a cityscape with a hopeful tone. The choice is ours. Are we ready to invest in the future of law enforcement, just as we have in professional sports? It's a path that requires commitment, but the rewards could be transformative. Let's make it happen. Gap 5.0's, end credits roll over cityscape. Gap 3.0's, title card appears with addressing challenges and criticisms against a backdrop of a cityscape under construction. In this final chapter, we'll address the challenges and criticisms of investing heavily in law enforcement reform. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of community meetings and protests. What are the potential pitfalls and how can they be mitigated? Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of experts discussing resource allocation. One major concern is the allocation of resources. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of police officers undergoing training. Critics argue that the substantial financial investment required for reform might divert funds from other vital community services, such as education and healthcare. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of successful training sessions and team-building exercises. This is a valid concern, as a balanced approach is crucial for overall community well-being. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of community engagement initiatives. To mitigate this, it's essential to adopt a holistic budgeting strategy. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of police officers undergoing training. By involving various stakeholders, including community leaders, policymakers, and financial experts, we can create a comprehensive plan that ensures adequate funding for all critical areas. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of successful training sessions and team-building exercises. Another challenge is the resistance to change within law enforcement agencies themselves. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of community engagement initiatives. Implementing new training programs and protocols can be met with skepticism and pushback from officers accustomed to traditional methods. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of successful training sessions and team-building exercises. Overcoming this requires strong leadership and clear communication. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of community police collaboration. By highlighting the benefits of reform and providing support throughout the transition, agencies can foster a culture of continuous improvement. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of community engagement initiatives. This is similar to how NBA teams embrace new training techniques and technologies to stay competitive. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of community police collaboration. Additionally, there's the challenge of maintaining community trust. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of community engagement initiatives. Any changes in law enforcement practices must be transparent and involve active community participation. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of community police collaboration. Without this, reforms risk being perceived as superficial or insincere. Gap 2.0's, transition to a split screen showing successful reform case studies and community events. Building trust takes time and consistent effort. Gap 2.0's, transition to footage of community police collaboration. Regular town hall meetings, community policing initiatives, and open lines of communication can help bridge the gap between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Gap 2.0's, transition to a split screen showing successful reform case studies and community events. Just as NBA teams face challenges in maintaining team cohesion and public support, law enforcement agencies must navigate similar dynamics. Gap 2.0s, transition to a cityscape with a reflective tone. The key lies in commitment, transparency, and a willingness to adapt. Gap 2.0s, transition to a cityscape with a reflective tone. While the road to comprehensive law enforcement reform is fraught with challenges, the potential benefits make it a journey worth undertaking. Gap 2.0s, transition to a cityscape with a reflective tone. By addressing these criticisms head-on and working collaboratively, we can pave the way for a safer, more prosperous future for all. Gap 5.0s, end credits rollover cityscape. Gap 3.0s, title card appears with a call to action, valuing our public servants, against a backdrop of a sunrise over a city. Finally, we'll summarize the key points and call for action. Gap 2.0s, transition to footage of police officers, firefighters, and teachers in action. What steps can we take as a society to start valuing our public servants like we do our athletes? Gap 2.0s, transition to footage of community engagement and teamwork. First, we must recognize the importance of investment. Gap 2.0s, transition to footage of training sessions and community workshops. Just as NBA teams invest in the best training, facilities, and support for their players, we need to allocate resources toward comprehensive training and support for our public servants. Gap 2.0s, transition to footage of community leaders and policymakers in discussion. This includes not just financial investment, but also emotional and moral support from the community. Second, we need to foster a culture of continuous improvement. Gap 2.0s, transition to footage of workshops and team-building exercises. Embrace change and innovation, just as professional sports teams do. Gap 2.0s, transition to footage of community police collaboration. Encourage our public servants to adopt new techniques, technologies, and strategies that can enhance their effectiveness and safety. Third, build and maintain trust within the community. Gap 2.0s, transition to footage of town hall meetings and community events. Transparency and active participation are key. Gap 2.0s, transition to footage of community police collaboration. Open lines of communication and regular engagement initiatives can help bridge the gap between public servants and the communities they serve. Gap 2.0s, transition to footage of community police collaboration. Just as athletes rely on the support of their fans, our public servants need the backing and trust of the people they serve. Finally, let's celebrate and honor our public servants. Gap 2.0s, transition to footage of award ceremonies and community celebrations. Recognize their achievements and sacrifices, just as we celebrate the accomplishments of our favorite sports teams. Gap 2.0s, transition to a montage of public servants receiving awards and applause. By valuing and appreciating their hard work, we can inspire a new generation to step up and serve their communities with pride and dedication. Gap 2.0s, transition to a cityscape with a hopeful tone. Together, we can create a society that values and supports its public servants, ensuring a safer, more prosperous future for all. Gap 2.0s, transition to a cityscape with a hopeful tone. Let's take these steps today and make a lasting impact on our communities. Gap 5.0s, end credits roll over a cityscape with an inspirational tone.